Jeremy Moore, ADOT.
Lance Peterson with PAG.
Jose Rodriguez, Town of Oro Valley.
Fausto Burrell, Town of Marana.
And starting our audience, Dustin.
Nadine Manuel, Donna Autumn Nation.
Who was that online that just spoke?
Nadine Manuel, I'm the Executive Director for the Planning and Economic Development for Donna Autumn Nation. This is my first meeting.
To the online folks now, Brian. All right, I don't see Brian. I think he dropped off. Are you still there, Brian?
Oh, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Oh, great. Okay, Brian Calvert with Kimley Horn.
Thank you, Brian. Jason?
Jason Bahi with the Pasquiyaki tribe.
Thank you, Jason. Michael?
Michael Oglesby, GM at Suntran.
Thank you. Dan?
Good morning, Dan Gabbio, Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you, Dan. Davida?
Davida Mueller, Suntran.
Jennifer?
Jennifer Hobart, ADOT Multimodal Planning Division, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you, Jennifer. Josue?
Hey everybody, Josue Staff City South Tucson.
Thanks, Josue. And Natalie?
Good morning, Natalie Shep, Pima County Department of Environmental Quality.
Thank you, Natalie. Was there anyone else online that I didn't get a chance to call on? Okay, hearing none, that is everyone. Before I go to item 2, just a quick reminder that the microphones are new. And so just remember to unmute yourself when you speak. Otherwise, the folks online can't hear what you're saying. With that, I'll go to item 2, in-kind reporting. Jeanette.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. We did send the sign-in sheet around, but please make sure you sign it before you leave today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeanette. We will move on to item 3, election of the 2025 TPC chair and vice chair. And I just want to say this is my last meeting as chair because the mayor of the city of Tucson is the chair of PAG Regional Council and Mr. Tamir is the chair of Management Committee. So I can no longer serve as the chair of TPC. So we will have a new chair. I'll turn it over to Jeanette.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much for serving as chair for the past
2 years.
Past 2 years. Good. It's nice. It's been nice to have you and work with you. So thank you. And thank you, Jose, for serving as vice chair. So each year following the election of the regional council officers, the Transportation Planning Committee chair and vice chair are elected among the eligible jurisdictional transportation representatives to serve as the chair or vice chair for a 1-year term. As Mr. Credio said, the city of Tucson and the town of Marana are not eligible because their mayors serve as the chair and vice chair of the PAG Regional Council. So with that, we will take nominations for individuals who would like to serve as chair or vice chair. Of course, those online are also eligible. And if you would like to serve, please speak up, but if not, feel free to nominate each other as well. Do we have anybody interested in serving as chair?
Do we have any nominations? I see a lot of head shaking. Nobody's making eye contact with me.
Everyone's looking down.
I think I actually wasn't here for this meeting last year, which is why I'm still chair. So feel free to nominate somebody that's not here. Anyone?
That was, do you guys have information on who's been chair recently? I know I was chair for a bit. I know Sam has been, Jose has been lots of times over the years, but
Prost is not
Miranda
eligible.
can't, Miranda can't, and the city can't, but
Correct.
Sarita,
I don't know that we have a representative.
Oro
from
Valley,
Oh.
Pasquiyaki,
Jason would be
Tohono
eligible.
O'odham.
Josue, you're eligible. A representative from the tribes are also eligible.
Jose, you want to be chair again?
I'd like to give somebody an opportunity. I think I served chair. I'd like to give somebody else an opportunity to serve as a chair. I mean, I served as a chair for multiple times in the past, but if nobody wants to volunteer, we're gonna have somebody here. Catherine? I'll accept the nomination.
Accept.
Wait a minute, nobody nominated.
I'll nominate Jose.
Nominate myself. No.
So did I hear a nomination for Jose as chair?
Yes, I'll nominate him.
All right. Do we need a second?
It would be nice to have.
Second.
There. All right. Fausto, second. So we have a motion and a second for Jose to become chair of TPC. Any discussion? And then I'll take the vice chair separate.
Yes.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Congratulations, Jose. You are now the chair. Do I finish out the
Yeah, you
vote for
can
vice
finish
chair?
this,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I'm gonna do one more. All right. So who would like to be vice chair? I think it's a pretty easy position if you were uneasy about being chair, just filling in when the chair is not available.
So nominate Olive since he's not here.
We could nominate, yeah. Josue, are you interested in being vice chair?
I guess. Put me on the spot. Yeah, I could do that.
I don't know. Can I make a motion?
You sure can.
All right. I move to select Josue as the vice chair. Is there a second? All right, Jose, second. I guess Josue, do you accept? It's a
Yes.
shaky yes.
Yes.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Congratulations, Josue.
Thank you.
So our new chair is Jose from Town of Oro Valley and Josue from City of South Tucson. And I'll just take a little bit of privilege of having the mic and just say thank you for allowing me to serve these last 2 years. Definitely learned a lot and appreciate the opportunity to continue to serve TPC in a participatory role. So congratulations to the new officers. And I'll turn it over to you.
Would you want to just finish off this meeting since the logistics, you have, you're in front of the, you might as well just finish. I mean, I would, but because of the virtual meeting, I got to be sitting in front of the,
What's the
I would say
protocol
just
for
finish
that?
off the meeting
It's fine.
today.
Okay, all right,
One, just, yeah, finish off. the meeting.
all right.
Thanks.
You owe me one. Yeah, all right. All right, we'll move to item 4, approval of the February 19th, 2025 meeting summary. Are there any comments or edits to the meeting summary from February 19th? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
All right, so motion, is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to item 5, review of the Transportation Art by Youth Program applications, fiscal year 2025. Lance Peterson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm pleased to be here this morning. In your packets, we have 2 TABI projects that we were going to review, but the city of South Tucson has pulled their application, so today we'll only be reviewing the town of Oro Valleys at this time. City of South Tucson is hoping to make it to the April TPC for their review of their project. And with that, Jose is ready to present their Tabby project. So for your review and approval.
Thank you, Lance. Okay, we'll get to that PowerPoint presentation. All right. Thank you, Lance and committee members. The Town of Oro Valley's submitted an application for this year for artwork that'll benefit the general public. And what we're looking at is a functional art that seeks beauty objects that are useful for everyday life, promotes alternate modes and health lifestyle for pedestrians and bicyclists, walkable communities along major corridors, youth pride in the community, and obviously youth employment. Next slide, please. This year, we're looking at the public artwork. The public artwork consists of designing and constructing a three-dimensional sculpture utilizing desert-safe and durable materials. It will act as a monument entrance to the Naranja Park and will complement the existing Tabby artwork mural that's entitled Day to Night, located southeast of Tangerine Road in Musset. This is the existing artwork that was done about 3 years ago. It's at the entrance to the Naranja Park on the east side. And as you can see, it's a very colorful and a very attractive artwork. Next slide, please. For this particular project, we're looking on at the west side entrance of the Naranja Park. It'll be located on Tangerine Road. And as you can see in the aerial photo to the bottom, that's the proposed location for the sculpture. Next slide. In more detail, this is where we're proposing to put the sculpture. Again, west of the entrance to the Naranja Park. And as you can see, we'll do some grading where it says Naranja Park. That's where the artwork will be situated. Next slide. This is a project schedule. This year is going to be a little different. In the past, we used to do artwork during the summertime, try and get it all before the school starts in July. This year, we're going to start in May with student applications, and then we'll call for artists, and then work through the summer and through the fall, and trying to get the project done by late fall or late November. Next project. Next slide. The breakdown on the budget is looking at $75,000. Looking at wages and the production facilities, supplies, materials, and obviously we are going to have SACA help us to do the administration. Next slide. SACA is the Southern Arizona of Arts of Cultural Alliance. They're going to help us seek students for the project and also the artists. And they'll do most of the administration, obviously with our approval. Next slide. And that's pretty much it. It's a pretty straightforward project. Again, it's a project on Tangerine Road. We're looking at artwork that looks like a sculpture, three-dimensional, that'll supplement what's already there. And acts also like a monument to the Naranja Park, which is highly used. A lot of foot traffic out there. We just opened it up and there's so much traffic out there that we're also looking at, we're doing the warrants in there for a traffic signal, potential traffic signal. That's how much traffic's out there right now. So it's highly used. So I think that's an ideal location for this type of artwork.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I have a question. You mentioned there's some grading work that needs to be done at that intersection in that picture. Is the town of Oro Valley doing the grading work, or is
most of the time we'll get our guys in operations to go out there and help us out with the grading, rough grading.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Jose on this? All right, no questions. Lance, can you mentioned at the beginning, I'm sorry, I wasn't totally paying attention. I got distracted. Who pulled their application?
The city of South Tucson has pulled their application that's in the packet, and they are looking to try and pull together their project for next TPC in April.
Okay.
To come.
Okay.
Realizing it's getting close to the summer work schedule that typically is when, the students need to be working. So, but Josue is working towards that right now.
Okay, so that will come to us in April as an action item. So the only action we're taking today is on the Oro Valley project, and that doesn't disclude the South Tucson project. We're just moving forward
Correct.
on
Just,
Oro
we're
Valley.
just doing the Oro Valley, and then hopefully April will be set for City of South Tucson.
Right. Any other questions for Lance or Jose? All right, this is an action item, so I would entertain a motion to approve the action as laid out by Mr. Peterson.
So moved.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Lance. All right, we'll move on to item 6, update on the Dial-A-Ride and micro transit service area. And who's presenting on this? And just remember to turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm Mariette Echeverry. I'm with Kimley Horn and the project manager for this project. And we are going to give you a brief update on what we are doing with public involvement, the ongoing effort, and what we have advanced in terms of the service areas that we are proposing and what the simulation results we have right now. And then there is going to be opportunity for discussion. So the work to date has been the development of the existing conditions and the needs assessment. We went through the first round of public engagement, and we used the existing conditions and the engagement to define the opportunity zones. This is where we are evaluating the feasibility of providing microtransit service. And then we are also in the process of performing all the simulation to determine if that is actually really something that the region will operate well, and some phasing that we have been also resolving. So on the public involvement, we had the first round of engagement from October 22nd to October 24. And it was a very comprehensive engagement. We had pop-up events at transit stations at the University of Arizona. We went to Tucson, Meet Yourself. We had several open houses, and we hosted several focus groups with the drivers for Sun Shuttle, Sun Chan, and for the on-demand and for the fixed route as well, because we really think that the drivers can give us a lot of information. We also had focus groups with the social service agencies, and we had an interview with Oro Valley and surveys. We received about 127 surveys. And with all this engagement, I think the kind of the findings of this engagement are that the public really consider that the service in general is good, but that this need for extended service on weekends, extended service during weekdays, and more frequent service in some routes. And also we were asking about how they felt about on-demand service, microtransit, and most of the people responded that they would like to see something like that. And right now we are on the second phase of the public engagement. We began yesterday, 18, and we are going to do several events until tomorrow. So the things that we had been working on are the technical meetings. We had a meeting with the technical committee yesterday. It was a very productive, and I will give you the kind of the talking points in the next slide. We are today at the Green Valley Library, and also we are visiting again the transit stations, and we have several focus groups that have been already scheduled. So we are talking to the WPCC in Ajo, and talking to the school district in Vail, and some other groups that we have already identified. Oh, and we talked to the citizens of Picture Rocks yesterday. And for the technical advisory committee, we have had 3 meetings already. The first meeting was in October, and we discussed at the meeting, we discussed the goals for the project and kind of what the technical committee thought of transit and where additional transit was needed. So the main points that were raised at that meeting is that kind of the perception of transit. People feel sometimes unsafe because of inadequate lighting or lack of pedestrian facilities to get to the stations. That transit is really needed in unincorporated areas. And here we heard a lot from Vail that there is a big need to connect Vail with the general area. That the community members would like to have more frequency to existing destinations, that funding could be a challenge, and we understand that there is going to be a referendum later this year, so all the kind of funding source is something that is of concern. And is really affordable transit is really needed for vulnerable communities. So we had the second meeting in February 18, and we presented at that meeting kind of the first draft of the opportunity zones. And we will get into the opportunity zones later in the presentation. And so we divided kind of the area in what could be weekday and weekends. And we talked with the technical committee about the phasing, and we made adjustments to the phasing. And then we talked also about cost and capacity constraints. And the third meeting was yesterday. And we discussed in more detail the results of the simulations, and the technical committee gave us really good input about some additional areas that we should be considering when considering microtransit. And I wanted to give you, we presented to you in December, but I wanted to give you kind of a recap of what the findings were in our assessment, just to put everything in context. So in our assessment and through the public engagement, we found that the transit service in general provides very good coverage. Suntran covers practically the entire city, and it has really good frequency, really good service. Sunshore provides also a lot of service to the kind of the more suburban and rural areas. And but even when coverage is very good, there is limited on an existing service on weekends, and that's one of the elements that the public brought to us, telling us that that was something that would be really important for them to get. So the need for extended hours during the weeks and weekends. And in looking at specifically at Picture Rocks and Vail, we look at the density, and the density in Picture Rocks is very low. So we think that only demand service like the dial ride or on-demand service like microtransit will be appropriate there. So no fixed route. And Vail has similar characteristics, but it has a little bit more higher trip density. And I'm gonna show you the kind of the travel data in a second. So that also could be served by microtransit. So this is the, let me see, what is the, I guess I cannot do this. We also show you this in December. This is kind of the travel demand. And Brian is going to talk about this as we go through the simulation. But what we wanted to do here was to identify how the region is connecting and where the needs for kind of additional connectivity were. And we use this in conjunction with the assessment and the public engagement input to determine where the opportunity zones are. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it to Brian.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to walk through the simulation process for planning microtransit service, kind of how we built off of the existing conditions to arrive at the service opportunity zones, and from that get the performance metrics that will be used to evaluate whether or not microtransit is a good fit for a community. So on this slide, I'm just showing you some of the variables that affect whether or not a microtransit service succeeds and all the stuff that we are taking into account when we are developing and modeling through our simulation process. Next slide. And so once we kind of had all that data from like travel demand and the needs of the community, we started drawing up some places where we'd like to investigate microtransit further. And I will show you a map of all the zones that we analyze later, but we first had to group them into two categories. So we have group one is our weekday service only. These will only have service on weekdays, but these communities tend to be more rural, lower density, lower transit propensity, and so we have lower expected ridership. Meanwhile, our group two, our extended service zones, are more densely populated with more trip activity and a higher transit propensity. And we just think that microtransit will have a higher expected ridership. And so with these two categories, this is an input into our simulation process. And I'll show you all the zones on the next slide. We have 13 zones that we analyzed. And they are all kind of on the periphery of like the Tucson core, because as we found in the existing conditions part, the fixed route service in the downtown core and the immediate surroundings are really good. It's only when you get to like the edge where it starts, where transit service quality is a little lower. And so you'll see here that the orange zones are our weekday service zones and our blue zones are the expanded service zones. And so with this data, if you go to the next slide, this is showing the parameters that we're defining kind of as a starting point for our simulation. First talking about the travel rules. So we are not putting any restrictions on where people can travel when they're inside the zone. So you can go anywhere to anywhere. And then you could also go to a certain point of interest that are nearby but are outside of the zone. And I'll show you that later. In terms of our booking model, it's purely on-demand service. So you order a trip in the app and then it'll come a few minutes later. We have different target wait times for our two zones. Our weekday zones have about 20 to 25 minutes on average wait time, and our extended zones are about 10 to 15 minutes. Our bus stop model, we are taking passengers curb to curb. That means that we are not doing virtual stops. We're taking them closest to their starting and final destinations. Our fleet, we are assuming minivans, with some of them being wheelchair accessible. And our service hours, our weekday zones are going to be weekdays only. Our extended zones include Saturdays and Sundays, and also the span during the day is a little longer. Next slide. And so the first step in our process is coming up with the ridership estimate. And so a lot of factors go into this, including like population, jobs, transit propensity, and also the quality of service that we're providing, which is the two zones. And so you'll see the ridership estimates on the right, which is on weekday average and annual. And we also thought of some phasing, which is also an input to our simulation, but we have been adjusting this as we run the simulation, and we'll probably continue to do so once we get some feedback. And so the next couple of slides, we'll go through, I'm going to run through each of the zones one by one and kind of show you the service zone boundary, the destinations that are outside, and also some of those key performance indicators that we're looking at as the result of the simulation process. So on the right here is the map. And so within the zone, you can go anywhere. And then those red dots kind of in the corner are those outside points of interest that we're also serving. And then just going to run down the performance indicators on the left a little bit, just to get an idea of like what we're showing here. It's a lot of numbers. But the fleet size is the result of our modeling to see just how many vehicles need to be operating at during the day to be able to serve the trip demand. The weekday ridership is from the last slide, but it's how many people do we anticipate riding the service every day. Productivity, we are defining as boardings per revenue hour. And so this is just how many people board the service per, and it's a service of a measure of efficiency. The typical wait time is kind of like that average wait time that we expect expect riders to be waiting. It is a design parameter, and then this is showing you whether or not we're meeting that design parameter. Ride duration is how long do passengers spend inside the vehicles. And then we have annual ridership, annual vehicle hours, and then the estimated cost to run the service for entire year, and then cost per ride. So it is the annual cost over divided by the annual ridership, and that is going to be a measure of cost efficiency. And so I'm going to run through these slides pretty quickly now, but first of all is Marano, which is an existing general public dollar ride service, and so we're keeping that same service boundary, but we're also adding Tucson Outlets, Arizona Pavilion Shopping Center, and Northwest Medical Center as external destinations to serve. Next slide. So Picture Rocks is another one of our weekday service zones, and we are also including Tucson Outlets, Arizona Pavilions, and Northwest Medical Center as external connections. And this is one of our lower performing zones with a lower ridership and lower efficiency. And I forgot to mention, all of these zones are designed to connect to the fixed route network at one of the locations, whether that's inside the zone or at one of those outside points of interest. But yeah, this is one of our lower efficiency and lower ridership zones. Next slide. The Tortolita area. So this one is our extended service zone. It has a lot of points of interest already within, so that's going to help that efficiency. And then we're also defining some other locations outside. And this one, because it is more compact and higher trip activity, we do see a higher efficiency at up to 3.6 boardings per hour, and up to as down to $24 per ride. Next slide. Oro Valley, this one is an existing general public dollar ride zone. It is also one of our higher performing zones with a lot more trip activity and a low cost per ride. Next slide. Casa Adobes, this one is also performing pretty well, low cost per ride, a lot of trip activity going on. Catalina Foothills, this one's going to be a weekday service one just because it's a lower transit propensity zone. It is quite large, one of our larger zones, but because we see a lot of like population density and also that the destinations are relatively close to the zone, it does perform it performs pretty well for a weekday service zone. Tanque Verde is a weekday service zone. Has a higher cost per ride just because those destinations are a little further out. Next slide. Rita Ranch in Savano, so moving on to the southeast of the city. This one is one of our smaller zones, but because it's compact and it has a lot of destinations, both within and close by, it is performing pretty good for one of our weekday service zones. Moving on to Vail, this one is also a weekday service zone, and it is on the smaller side, but it does have quite a few destinations here nearby. So and so you'll see the efficiency is about like $34 per hour or per ride. Sorry. Tucson Estates / Drexel Heights / Valencia West. This one's one of our probably the largest zone that we have, and you'll see all the destinations are over there on the east side of the zone. So for the short trips, it performs really well, but some trips could get to very long, and so those will drive up the cost per ride. West Tucson, this one is special because it does encompass the currently existing Sun on Demand microtransit zone. So it can be considered kind of expansion of that. And so running the simulation results, we do see that it performs pretty well just because of the high density and the high direct activity inside the zone. Sartor Green Valley, this one is an existing general public dial ride zone, so the boundary is unchanged from that. And this one actually does perform pretty well for our weekday service zones. And last but not least, Ajo. So this one is an existing dollar ride zone that just serves that community. And what we found in our existing conditions analysis is actually that the existing dollar ride service is performing very well. And so we simulated converting that into a on-demand microtransit service and as an extended service zone. And we see that the estimated cost per ride could get down to as much as $37. Next slide. And so I just ran through all the zones really quickly, but here is kind of like the high-level overview of the results. And we're also highlighting some of the highest performing and the lowest performing in each of those performance measures that we are looking at. And so you'll see that the fleet size that we're recommending doesn't drop below 2 vehicles because we do think that zones will need that extra vehicle, even if they don't need it all the time, but it's good to have a backup. And also because our zones are relatively larger, to have 2 vehicles on either side just so our wait times don't get way too long. And as you can see, our extended service zones generally perform better, but we'll take this data and from the public feedback that we're receiving at this phase of outreach and make some modifications to this, and we'll have more results. Next slide. And so some of the key takeaways that we want to highlight as part of our simulation process that comes to designing and planning a microtransit service. First of all, the efficiency of each zone is influenced by the potential ridership demand and estimated trip durations. And so basically saying that the best performing zones are going to have a lot, the best performing zones are influenced mostly by the ridership demand estimate from the beginning. The large zones and the faraway destinations will lead to longer trips and thus less efficient services. So we know that we want to serve those locations because we observe a lot of people going there, but we do have to keep in mind that those faraway destinations will lead to lower efficiency. We recommend each zone have a minimum of 2 vehicles at all times, even though that second vehicle may not be needed at some times, but just to ensure that the service is reliable and we always have that backup vehicles. And some of the zones where we see really low performance, we could consider a pre-scheduled service instead. So not a true on-demand microtransit service, but more of like a call ahead, pre-schedule, more like a traditional dial-a-ride service. And yeah, that is all we have to share today, but really excited about this simulation, and I'll hand it back to Mariate.
So the next steps in the process is to finalize the simulations and adjust the phasing and timeframes based on all the public engagement input. We will develop the preferred scenario, and then we will determine for that preferred scenario the number of vehicles that is for each one of the zones, the number of vehicles that is required, the productivity levels, and also the ridership, et cetera, et cetera. We are going to be performing the Title VI analysis at the same time to determine if there are disproportionate impacts with modifying the existing service and adding new service. And we'll perform an analysis of the air quality benefits and the vehicle mile travel reduction. And then we finally will develop the recommendations and prepare the final report. And that concludes our presentation. Any questions?
Great, thank you so much. Are there questions for the Gimli Horn team? I see online Michael Oglesby has his hand up. Michael?
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation. It was enlightening. I have a question for you. As you were moving forward with these scenarios. Each time you went through the scenario, I was sort of running through my head where fixed route would attach. And there are some locations where either it doesn't attach or we have express routes. And, with my experience, when you run a micro transit, it's an extension of public transportation. So you want to serve the locations that just don't have public transportation, but you also want them to feed into the fixed route system, sort of like the main vein and vice versa. So if that wasn't, it doesn't appear as if the fixed route system wasn't totally taken into consideration. How are you projecting success?
Considering connecting to the fixed route at all
Yes.
times. As Brian mentioned, some of these zones will go out of the zone to be able to connect to fixed route, and it will connect to either fixed route or the express route. So the idea is to create an integrated system, because otherwise, people will get just confined to their zone, and it will not extend their reach. So
No,
yeah, that's really
I-
important. Yeah.
I understand it's important, but I just don't see it in your scenarios, each one of those scenarios that you went on. And Davida, if you're on, you can chime in. I looked at a few of them and I said, well, this seems like it's way out, but it's not connecting to anything. That doesn't help anybody
Saying
based on what you showed.
Yeah, that they will connect outside of the area. So you have the zone, and most of these zones have kind of these locations outside of the area where they will connect to either a high destination or an existing stop to fixed route or express route.
I understand that. It doesn't show that on that document I saw though. So do you have additional documents I can see?
Actually, if I may, all the zones do have a fixed route connection. I made sure of that when we were designing the zones.
Okay, one, I don't have it off, I jotted it down, but one was connected to one of our express routes, which is not a lot of service. So are you taking that into consideration also?
Yeah, some of the zones do only connect to an express route.
Ask us a follow-up question. Did the simulations take into account those connections to fixed route, or were they confined just to the
Yeah.
simulation zones?
Yeah, no, they take into account every time that they go outside of the zone. Yeah, and just so you know, one of the comments that we received from the TAC was to include the fixed route map on the on the opportunity zone. So this is more evident. So when we prepare the report, you will see that this is overlapping and connecting to those fixed routes. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I have a couple questions, but I'll defer to my colleagues first. Questions? Can you go back to the public outreach slide?
Yes.
I just wanted to. Sorry, it's way at the beginning. So I was just looking over the material. It talks about extensive public outreach, including interactive online engagement methods. Can you tell me more about the interactive online engagement methods?
So we have a survey that is actually active right now, and the public will have the opportunity to complete that. The PAC released a press release, and I believe social media as well, Hannah, right? And we have flyers that have the QR code, and we have the flyers at every single place we are showing up, so people can take flyers with them, or so yeah, there is a survey, and there was a survey on the first phase as well.
And is the survey in both English and Spanish?
Yes.
And then how are you ensuring that people with disabilities, like for example, visual disabilities, are able to access the information and provide feedback?
Well, if anyone needs assistance, we provide assistance, but we have not received any requests.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the face-to-face interactions, I see that you're at the transit centers. Are you also doing intercept surveys on the vehicles themselves, and how are you gaining that?
No, we are just staying at the transit centers.
Okay. And then my last question, I can't remember what slide it was on. A lot of the kind of initial feedback you got seemed very duplicative to the information that the city and Suntran received as part of our comprehensive operational analysis. So how are you, it just seems like we're sort of repeating the same thing. And so how are we trying to go beyond some of the work? First, I guess first question is, how are you taking into account the information we already received as part of our COA? And then how are you going beyond that to figure out, some more meaningful input regarding microtransit?
So we review all the relevant plans that have been developed. So the COA was one of them, and we use that to prepare our assessment. In the case of Suntran, because Suntran is serving the area so well, really the Suntran area is not going to be affected except on the west side. Yeah. So we are focusing the effort on more on the surrounding areas, which seems to be the places where people need access to transit.
Okay. And then my last question is related to the Sun Shuttle Dial-A-Ride service, which is comparable to the city Sunvan service. We've heard some concerns about that service, and I was just curious: are you engaging the community of disabled people on how their services with Dial? Is that part of this contract to get some information on how to improve service for people with disabilities?
Yes, definitely. And we met with social service agencies, and we received really good information from them about the needs of people with disabilities. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for the team on this item, or any questions online? I don't see any hands up. Okay, great. Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 7, update on the regional active transportation plan. This is Hannah and Chris. Although I don't see Hannah coming up, so you don't look like Hannah.
All right, you will hear me okay? Perfect. Morning, everybody, and thank you for your time this morning and allowing us on your agenda. I know you have a full one with a lot of presentations, so I'll try to move through this relatively quickly, but definitely happy to answer any questions that you may have. So quick agenda of what we're going to be talking about. I'll give you an update on what we've been doing since the last time we presented to this committee back late last year. We're going to go through at a high level the detailed technical analysis results that we did during our existing conditions phase, talk about the methodology we're going through to identify high priority networks for active transportation improvements across the region, give you a little preview of what our plan is for the second round of public engagement that we'll be launching here, and then talk you through the next steps of the project. So progress so far, we've completed our vision goals and objectives and our regional connectivity analysis tasks. We're in the middle of our regional corridor identification and evaluation. So this includes both the detailed technical analyses that my partner Kristen here is going to go through in a minute, as well as identifying the high priority networks where active transportation improvements would be most impactful in the region, as well as the projects that go along with those networks to help fill the gaps and bring context appropriate solutions to that high priority network across the region. We're also at the tail end of developing an active transportation toolbox that serves as a regional guide to active transportation treatments, considerations on when to use them, when not to use them. And so we are addressing comments from agency staff on that right now, and then we'll be putting that out in draft form. Also, we're starting our air quality benefits. So as we identify the high priority network, we'll be quantifying air quality benefits from that. And then we will soon be moving into developing our final report. So project schedule. We are currently in talks with PAG staff on potentially extending this to give a little more time on refining the preferred network and projects that we come up with. So this may go out a little further than we're showing here, but as of right now, we have a few months left in the project. We're finishing up the corridor identification and evaluation. So the high priority network and the associated projects that go along with it here in the next month and a half or so, quantifying our air quality benefits, and then developing our final report starting in April. So at this point, I'll let Kristen come up and we're going to talk through some of the detailed technical analyses that we did that are a lot of the basis for how we're developing these high priority network scenarios.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. So like Chris said, we're going to hop through our 5 technical analyses that kind of guide where active transportation need is in the region. So our first one is level of traffic stress, which measures pedestrian and bicycle comfort along the arterial network. Our second analysis was our vulnerable populations and public health. And so that looks at where disadvantaged or vulnerable populations are throughout the region and where socioeconomic inequities might be as we consider that in the region. Our third one is our regional travel pattern analysis, and this takes into account where short trips are occurring throughout the roadway network and where those short trips can potentially be transferred and shifted to active transportation trips to leverage that opportunity, as well as where crossing demand is on the roadway network currently. And then we have our safety analysis. So this looks at the density of pedestrian and bicycle involved crashes along the roadway network. And then lastly, our connectivity analysis, which summarizes how pedestrians and bicyclists can access their destinations directly. So how long will that take in quantifying that? So next, Chris will go through our high priority network identification process that encompasses these analyses.
Thanks, Kristen. So we've developed a multi-step process here to take a lot of that information that we developed in our existing conditions analysis and build to kind of where are the most impactful projects across the entire region that we can implement to help move the needle on active transportation. So first step in the process here is identifying these strategic network packages or scenarios is another term that we can use for them. So a few alternatives on kind of how we want to look at, maybe look at the network in a few different ways, and we'll go through that here in a second. Second is developing evaluation criteria and weighting to help apply or how we get to those scenarios. We'll talk about that as well. We're also identifying a high priority network for each of those strategic network packages. So that's the process we're in right now. Much like the microtransit team, we met with our technical working group earlier this week. Got a lot of great feedback from that. We're continuing to make some changes to our methodology, and we'll be getting that out to our working group here, which is all agency staff to start reviewing the results of our strategic network package analysis. The next step after that is identifying the high priority network. So this is where we actually take those scenario inputs we've looked at and see, all right, how do we want to solidify this into one preferred network package that's when we're balancing all the different factors across the region that we want to serve with active transportation, where are the highest priority corridors that we should be investing in for agencies across the entire region. And the last step, and Jeanette put this well when we were talking the other day, that's all the demand side of the active transportation, that's all the needs. So this last step here is the supply. This is where, how do we get our supply context appropriate projects onto that high priority network to help serve that need that we've identified on the demand side. So these are 3 network packages or scenarios. The first one is maximizing need-based connectivity. So looking at demographics and travel demand that's out there right now for active transportation. Where is the maximum need? Second is maximizing overall accessibility. So how do we reach as many people as we can across the network? And third is maximizing safety. So if we really focus down on where there are existing or perceived safety issues that are potentially preventing people from using active transportation, what does that network look like if we really put our thumb on the scale for that? And so to turn that into something we can actually quantify, we developed these different, on the left side, you can see these different considerations. And then what we did is quantified each of those with a number of different evaluation metrics. So an example there for active trip potential is, as part of the detailed technical analysis, we looked at number of average trips with active trip potential by destination, average number of short vehicle trips per square mile, average number of short vehicle trips by destination. So I won't go through the whole list because it's a lot. But essentially the theory was we have these priorities. How do we break that down into something measurable that we can apply? So this is the first set here. We have public health, active trip potential, travel time, connectivity, and traveler alignment and crossing demand. We also additionally have safety, accessibility, and then the results of our first round of public engagement, where we had an interactive map where the public actually dropped points to tell us where they felt there were issues. So as I mentioned, we wanted to look at this from a few different angles in those strategic network packages. And so what we did is we have those same 8 categories in all the scenarios, but what we do is we change the weight we apply to each of those and really put our thumb on the scale in a few different ways. So for maximizing need-based connectivity, we really weighted public health and travel time very high and shrank the other ones proportionally. For maximize accessibility, we weighted active trip potential and traveler alignment and crossing demand, as well as the accessibility one very heavily. And finally, maximizing safety. By and large, almost half of the weight you'll see there goes to the actual observed safety data that we obtained at the beginning of the process. And the next biggest we actually supplemented with safety concerns from the existing, or from the first round of public engagement.
I have a question while you're on this slide.
Sure.
How did the technical working group, what role did they have in this evaluation criteria and weighting?
Sure. Yeah, we presented this methodology to the technical working group back in January. We actually had a whole separate additional meeting with the technical working group to lay out the process and get buy-in there. And so we reviewed both what was on the last slides, the metrics that made up these, and then we reviewed this weighting. One notable change from that is we actually had more of a balance in the maximizing safety category between observed safety data and public engagement safety data. And based on technical working group comments, they said we really want to focus on the data primarily, and a little bit less on what the public said as perceived safety issues, because that's kind of a self-selecting group. So that was one change we made after that meeting.
All right, great, thank you.
All right, so I'll show you the results, our initial results from these. I know they're going to be a little bit hard to see in this format. This got presented to the technical working group on Monday. We got a lot of great feedback. We're potentially tweaking our methodology a little bit, but we're going to be rolling this out to that group to do a detailed review here or late this week or early next week, and give them a couple weeks to give us feedback on this. But essentially what we did for each one is we broke the region into 9 areas. So there's the urban core, which is kind of the main built out piece of Tucson, and then 8 areas surrounding it. So west, northwest, north, etc., and worked our way around. And essentially what we wanted to do is find the highest priority corridors within each of those different areas. And so we mapped our top 10 segments from each area, and then worked to build a network off of those that is interconnected within that region at least, and ideally prefer some connectivity between those different areas that we broke up. So you'll see as we go through, and that's what the different colors are on the map, the oranges, greens, light blues, dark blues. Those are the different regions. What we did is did that for each scenario, and you'll see a lot of the corridors are consistent scenario to scenario, but there are a few different changes that come up between the different packages when we look at kind of weighting different things higher. So this is maximizing the need-based connectivity package. So where is the greatest need that's out there based on demographics and public health. Maximizing accessibility. So this is reaching more destinations across the region. And finally, maximizing safety. So this is where we saw a lot of observed pedestrian and bicycle safety concerns, and then we built our network from there. Not really expecting you to weigh in on any of the specific corridors right now. These are very much in flux and are going to our technical working group, but wanted to give you a little preview of kind of what this process is going to look like. Again, after we take these results and refine them, we're then going to develop from the 3 scenarios, 1 preferred network. And we talked about a few different ways we might potentially do that. One thing we noticed is, as I mentioned, a lot of the corridors remain consistent scenario to scenario. And so one thing we kind of want to look at is if we're building our network and we put our thumb on the scale in a bunch of different ways and the same corridors are popping up, seems pretty likely that those should be areas that would go into that preferred network ultimately.
I have a couple questions for you about this slide. So how did you delineate the subgroup areas? I mean, and then the second question kind of related to that is corridors that start in one subgroup area and go to another, does that weight them higher? How does that figure into your analysis?
And we don't have the map here, but we do have the map that shows how we broke up the region. The urban core is largely from the Rita River, and you delineated those, so you can help me if I misspeak. Largely from the Rita River to I-10, and then Santa Cruz River on the west to, what's the east boundary? It's before Houghton. But so that's the urban core. And then the other ones are kind of almost like pie pieces coming off of that. So we can provide that map to you that shows the delineation. As of right now, segments that cross boundaries, they didn't necessarily get a higher weight. But we did as we mapped the top 10 segments in each area. And then as we were stitching together the network, we were looking to make connections between the different regions to form a regional network. So that's definitely something we're looking at as we move into the preferred scenario as well, is we want connectivity between regions almost as much as we want connectivity within these areas. Okay. So public engagement, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing our second round of public engagement here relatively soon. The main content that we're going to show is that preferred network and the projects that we come up with to address adding context appropriate improvements to that network to make it comfortable for people to walk and bike. We are again going to leverage our public coordinate mapping platform. So you can see kind of faded on the right is actually the map we used in the first round of engagement that allowed people to drop points and lines anywhere within the region to tell us, where they experience issues. Essentially in the next one, we'll load all of our projects in there and allow people to comment on them and provide whether they like it or don't like the projects or help refine them for us. We'll also pair that with a survey to help rank the top projects. Right now, that's anticipated for late spring. Again, we're working with PEG staff on our schedule right now to allow some additional time for a technical working group. But we'll keep this group informed as we move toward our second round of engagement, because we'll definitely want your help getting the word out. Next steps. So again, we're going to move from our scenario networks to our preferred network and develop the package of projects that goes along with that ultimate preferred network. Then we'll do our second round of public and stakeholder engagement. Simultaneously, we'll be doing our air quality benefits analysis. And then after that, and we make any modifications to our projects and recommendations, we'll develop our final plan and do one round at that point, again, of public and stakeholder engagement to let everybody know the draft plan is out. They're able to comment on it and to try to build some excitement for continuing to invest in active transportation in the region. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions for the team on this? Catherine?
I have a a bunch of questions, so.
Fire away.
So the methodology is pretty complex and complicated, it looks like. And I know that the county's representatives on the working group have a lot of concerns, and I know you guys met earlier this week. Concerns with the methodology. How are we going to communicate it to the public as they're looking at this, and do we really agree with the results that are coming out? So I just want to make sure that there's time to address those concerns before the public outreach where people are voting on selected roads. I mean, I don't know how we're going to characterize what these projects are. And maybe that's a good segue to my next question. What will become with this list of prioritized packages? At this point, there's not funding for any of them. Is it going to become a limitation on future calls for projects that we need to focus on things that were identified through this? And maybe that question's more for PAG.
Yeah, I can start with, yeah. So I think your first question was kind of how do we communicate the methodology and needing time with the technical working group to refine that. And that's exactly why we're working with PAG staff right now on the schedule. We initially we were going to put these out, get feedback, put together our preferred network and prioritization, or preferred network and package of projects that go along with that preferred network. Now we're looking at potentially breaking that out into a couple extra meetings with technical working group and take it more step by step. As far as communicating it to the public, we're going to simplify as much as we can. Probably won't show them that big list of, pieces and parts that went into each of those different priorities we weighted. And really by the time we get to the public, we just want to show the preferred network and the packages that go along with it. So there won't be all of the different scenarios, really. And then as far as how to, I guess, from our standpoint, what you're getting with that is both your high priority network and then the packages to bring that network up to context appropriate active transportation facilities. So we're going to start with, what's out there now, or there already, things that would be recommended on that facility type, on that roadway or an adjacent roadway or a trail corridor. We'll look at programmed projects. I know we've been working with all the member agencies, including Pima County, to get any programmed active transportation projects that you have. So that will also factor in and kind of form our baseline. And then we're going to go back and fill in gaps to say, all right, you have a protected bike lane here and a shared use path, a mile down, and we need to fill that 1 mile gap between those two things. And that's going to be the list of projects that we provide with the high priority network.
Catherine, I'm going to just jump in here as a follow-up. Can you flip back to the slide that had the methodology with all the breakout pieces to it?
I can try.
It's the one, I think, right before the pie charts.
Oh, there we go. These guys?
Yeah, those two. So has the data that went into each of these line items, has this been provided to the technical working group to review?
Yes.
Okay.
So a lot of this came from those technical analyses that Kristen talked through. That was all loaded into a web map for the technical working group to review. And we did receive comments and at one of our working group meetings made some adjustments to the methodology for a couple of those.
I'd request that be shared with the TPC so we can review it as well.
That'd be great.
The web application.
Whatever the data is behind
sure.
this, so we can see how you develop the scoring. I'd like to see the background.
Sure.
So since we're on this, where would major employers come into play with the data? Is that travel time? Is that something else? Because in my mind, that would be a big driver, would be those employment centers.
Yep, within that accessibility, there's the roadway segment we're evaluating is within a 1/4 mile of an employment center, which we identified that data set. Was that directly from PAG or did we develop that? I'm trying to remember now. Okay. I think that was a predefined data set that we received.
And yeah, this is super complex. How are things like pedestrian versus bicycle trips differentiated, or the packaging? Because such different modes and.
Yeah,
and
so
where they
we
apply.
included, there were some of the baseline analyses included both bicycle and pedestrian input. So you can see the safety one there, for example. We have separated bicycle and pedestrian involved collisions, but we don't have a separate methodology for bicycle and pedestrian needs. We're trying to put it all together in the end to make an active transportation high priority network.
And then I guess maybe my last question, we'll see. But in terms of the projects, is there any place that we're putting costs in there? Because I know that like the need for additional right of way to implement some of these things is going to be a huge limiting factor on whether it's actually something that's feasible to move forward with.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the end, we're going to put the projects to the high priority network. At that point, we'll develop high level costs that go along with it as well. It is going to be unit cost based. There's going to be too many projects for us to go into a lot of detail as far as developing the cost estimate, but things we do on other regional planning projects include like a flag for do we need right of way or not, and we can include an average right of way cost for what we think we would need as part of that.
Yeah, because I know one thing that jumped right out at me, River Road is on there, which is a much different road. It's mostly residential in the areas that were shown, versus like Sunrise, which has a lot more right of way, but it has some missing links. So that would, the cost of doing those two projects would be vastly different.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead, Janet.
And Chris can probably explain this a lot better than I can, but one of the things we're going to be looking at is there's the corridor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the location of the project. So the corridor is there, there's demand there, but the project that we select to address the trips in that area might not necessarily be right on that corridor. River Road's a good example. You've got the loop right there. Trips are probably more suited to be on the loop than on River Road itself. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at and working with the technical working group to kind of dive into a little more detail.
Yeah, appreciate you adding that. We had a slide with a graphic for the technical working group that we took out for this one for brevity's sake. But yeah, things like a bike boulevard, a block or two over from the arterial is absolutely a context appropriate solution that we can recommend. That River Road example where the loop is right there, it might just be more connectivity between the activity centers on River Road and the loop trail. So that it's a little easier for people to go down to the trail rather than using the street itself. So those are all considerations we're going to be going through as we develop the project list.
Did you have more questions, Catherine? All right. Paul?
I just wanted to reiterate something that I heard at the technical working group that I think would be of tremendous value. And that is essentially the initial raw data identifying the existing network and the 400 some odd gaps that you have identified within that network. I think that would be the best starting place for the jurisdictions to take a look at that and understand how that might fit in with, a bicycle boulevard plan and other plans that the jurisdictions have developed themselves to understand and have a better approach to how they perceive prioritizing the network gap fills from the jurisdictional perspective. Because to be bound exclusively to a methodology that seems difficult to understand and nearly impossible to explain to an elected official or someone else is someplace that gets a little slippery from our perspective. Having that raw data, I think, would be very valuable for the jurisdictions to understand what does the network look like currently and where are the gaps that have been identified within those networks.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions? I have just one comment. I know that our representatives on the transit working group, transit on the head, the technical working group have just expressed a little frustration not receiving the material ahead of time. They're the folks that are really digging in and doing the technical work. And so I just ask that as best possible, give them the presentation or material that they're going to review and need input on ahead of time so they can really dig in and provide that meaningful input.
Yeah, and we talked about that in our last one. What we did is we have a web application to review the scenario network outputs. We didn't want to plop that in their lap without any context or anything on how to use it, what it shows. And so we had our meeting first, and then we're finalizing that web application, getting it out to the technical working group to give them a couple weeks to review that and provide their comments. So we're giving it enough time on this one. We just wanted to advance the meeting to the beginning to kind of lay out for them, this is what you're looking at, this is what we're looking for from you. But yeah, as we're modifying the schedule, we're looking at, when do we need to get materials to the technical working group to give them, a few days to a week before the meeting, so that they can at least be a little bit familiar with it ahead of time. So
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Paul?
And then, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to not let the question that Catherine posed slip away in terms of the potential use of identifying a high priority network and projects on that network. My fear is that if a jurisdiction has its own priorities that are outside of that network, how might that be factored into funding eligibility and moving projects that the jurisdiction sees necessary within the regional framework?
Do you want to answer that, Jeanette?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chair. I won't leave that one to Chris.
appreciate that.
Sure, you appreciate that. No, I'm not. No, not at all. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And we don't know for sure how the regional council is going to use the results in the priority network. So whether or not they use that as some sort of metric when doing project selection is yet to be determined. We'll see what their response is when we present the final project to them. One of the things we all realize is that, getting a project delivered is completely up to the will of the jurisdiction. If you guys aren't ready to bring a project forward, or if there's a reason to bring a different project forward, that's on the jurisdiction to identify those. We have worked really closely with all of you though to make sure that the projects that we know as of right now, our priorities are included, in the analysis. I know the city of Tucson has quite an extensive plan in place. Marana just did one. We work closely with Oro Valley and look through everybody's CIP projects and those types of things to make sure that we're identifying that. But, the only way an impact is made is if a project's delivered, and us as an agency don't bring projects forward to be implemented. They're delivered when you guys are ready to bring them forward. But we do hope that the plan does serve as a guide for our decision makers and also serves as an evaluation tool to see, are we making progress, as well as, really thinking through, how do we have the biggest impacts when funds do become available? As we all know, the availability of funding is always a limiting factor. I don't think the PAG region is any different than any other region in that. But hopefully, money will become available and this information will be useful to the decision makers.
So I guess, it just strikes me as odd that you don't anticipate any recommendation for the use of the product that is the development of the regional active transportation plan, and we'll just be presenting it to regional council for them to determine its applicability and use. I would hope and expect regional council would say, you tell us, you're the experts. Do you not anticipate bringing a recommendation and just presenting the material to regional council for them to react to? And that just gives me pause.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can,
Yeah.
I mean, we're planning on presenting them the high priority project list. And so that's going to be the deliverable to them. And that's going to be a recommendation of the working group and this body. So that's why, we've been taking our time working with the working group, making sure that that ultimate package is something that we all agree upon, and that will be our recommendation to the regional council.
And I think, Paul, what I'd submit to you and all of us is that as this item continues to come back to TPC, that we make some recommendations on how the regional council might use this information that mutually benefits the region. I think some of that work, that responsibility falls on us. And so let's make sure that we keep that at the forefront.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I appreciate the presentation. Let's move on to item 8. 2055 Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan RMAP update. Jeanette.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. We're here to present just a brief update on where we are with the RMAP. I'll let Hannah give the updates, and Dr. No is also here to provide some updates from the data science team. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeanette. Hello, good morning, members of the committee. So I'm just going to provide a very brief update on the 2055 RMAP, which is currently under development. So as mentioned at the last meeting, we are targeting July for the completion date of the RMAP. And that's due to the addition of the Moore Road TI project from the town of Marana. And that did require some additional time for modeling, which included air quality conformity. So with the addition of the Moore Road TI project and the Phoenix Zoo Access Road project from the town of Sarita, the in-plan project list is still within the fiscal constraint and totals $16.21 billion. Just as a reminder, the fiscal constraint is just over that at $16.217 billion. The data science team is finalizing their modeling efforts, and we hope to have an RMAP working group meeting soon to review those initial results. We are continuing to draft the document internally and anticipate having components to share with this committee next month. So again, very brief update as a follow-up to the last meeting, but happy to answer any questions. And then Dr. Hansuno, PAG's data science administrator, can provide a brief update on the work of the data science team in some more detail. Thank you.
Any questions for Hannah? Catherine?
Yeah, I have one question that came up since we last met, I believe, and that's since we're in the air conformity grace period, 2 of the recent tip amendments were rejected. One being the Cortero Road UPR overpass, and then the other was the Valencia Raise grant. And so I'm just wondering if there's any status update on that. That was my concern last time, that, you know, we're in this period where we can't really do anything in the tip that's really significant because of the air conformity. So what's the status update on that?
If I may, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Ms. Skinner. So we've been in communication with staff from both ADOT and Federal Highway Administration, and we are working to see if we can appeal that decision that rejected those 2 tip amendments back in January. Those were submitted before the air quality conformity lapse grace period commenced.
Is there a timeline when we expect, because we also have, you know, lots of separate conversations because our Valencia project is underway, and we're hearing that FHWA is not going to be, you know, flexible in this regard.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. I know Mr. Gabbio, I don't know if you're still on the call, if you wanted to comment on this, but we're just continuing to have the conversation and see if we can, that decision can be appealed. That's the latest I know.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. This is Dan Gabbio with Federal Highways. I have submitted the request up the chain for review, but that is where it is at right now. So hopefully we'll have a response to you in the near future on that.
Thank you, Dan.
Any other questions for Hannah? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the next presentation.
Oh, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
Hansu can.
Yeah, that's what I was
Oh, okay.
talking
I'm
about.
sorry.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought we were moving to the next
Just
agenda
a
item.
continuation of the RMF update. And my name is Hinsino, Data Science Administrator here at PAC, and they're here to provide updates on RMF modeling. Data science team has incorporated, like Hannah mentioned, the 2 additional project from our jurisdictional partners request and the network update, and we finished. And regarding the land use model, we identified an issue with our just land use data, which have since corrected, and with those 2 updates, and we ran 2024 to 2055 models and produced the land use model outputs and discussed and those and the updates with our jurisdictional partners, especially City of Tucson, development services teams, and through one-on-one meetings. Then additionally, we have a PopTech and a subcommittee meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, March 26, 11:30 a.m. And where we'll review the final land use model outputs. And for our travel demand model or just the activity-based model, we have a completed 2024-2055 model runs and currently generating performance measures to support the GNEST planning team and the GIS team for the RMF 2055 report. Additionally, we are currently also running the air quality models and for the Rehito PM10 non-attainment area conformity analysis. So that's concludes with the update for the 2055 RMA modeling. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much for the update. Any questions? Any questions online? All right. Thank you very much. Any other items on this?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
All right, great. We will move on to item 9, future agenda items. Does anyone have any agenda items they'd like to request for future agendas?
I was just gonna say the carbon reduction program and OWP programming. I know there was conversation at our regional council a year or more ago about needing to really discuss that, and overall work program must be in the works right now. It's that time of year.
Thank you, Catherine. That's the item I was going to request because I think we're coming up on the time that will be asked for input. So I would second that. Any others? So that was OWP and carbon. Are those two separate items or they're related?
I think they're interrelated. They could be two separate items for sure, because there's more to the OWP than just the carbon reduction program, but they're very interrelated.
Got it. Thank you. Any others? All right, hearing none, we stand adjourned at 10:27. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.